We've got a call on the government today, writing a letter to Peter Dutton for Commonwealth agencies to be able to withstand cyber attacks better. They have put $1.35 billion over a decade to boost spending in this area. Presumably that's going to go a long way.
Well, good afternoon, Tom. Good afternoon to your viewers. Look, it's important we've got money, but it also takes leadership. And what we know from this government so far, some 70% of federal government agencies, after 7 years, have not implemented the most basic cybersecurity measures as recommended by the Australian Signals Directorate. And Tom, that's important because we don't just expect our governments to protect our critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. We also expect them to protect our personal information. The Australian government holds a lot of personal information about Australians, our Medicare details, our JobKeeper details, our tax records, our passport. And it is important that our federal agencies take seriously their responsibilities to protect us from cyber security threats. It's all well and good, and it's right for the Prime Minister to ring the bell for the private sector, as he did a few weeks ago when it comes to cybersecurity. But the government must get its own house in order. It will not just take money, it will also take leadership and a determination across government.
You've also called for a dedicated minister. If you want to really shine a focus on it, does it need to be a cabinet minister? Does that mean replacing another role in cabinet?
Well, what we had under Malcolm Turnbull was a minister for cyber security. One of Scott Morrison's first actions as Prime Minister was to abolish that position. And now for some 680 days, Australia has been without a minister for cyber security. We don't have a new updated cybersecurity strategy. The last strategy expired in April. We are in a situation, Tom, where the Prime Minister fronts the nation, tells us that Australia is under a cyber attack from a sophisticated foreign state actor, but he does not have within his government an up-to-date cybersecurity strategy, adequate protections across federal agencies, or a minister who is responsible for protecting Australia.
All right, well, as I said, there's money being dedicated there. We'll see perhaps if there's a spelling out of where it would go and how it might help in that particular capability. My erstwhile colleague Peter Van Onselen has written about an issue in the New South Wales Ride, of which you're a member in Labor, not promoting enough women. Could this perhaps be addressed in a small way via a placement for Mike Kelly? He was the Shadow Assistant Defence Minister.
I saw that article by my former erstwhile colleague, Peter Van Onselen. And, yeah, the facts are what they are. They're undeniable. I don't think it's by ill intent, Tom, but rather it is where we are as a faction, and it does serve as a good warning to us in thinking in future pre-selections and the like. But you're right to point to the fact that there is currently a vacancy, and it's important that we have a pipeline of women coming through, gaining that experience so they can step up to the front bench. We have a leader in Anthony Albanese who is determined that our cabinet is 50% male and female. We have a party rules that require equal representation. And, you know, right after the election, we saw the promotion of Emma McBride, a member for Dobell, into the front bench. I'd like to see the vacancy left by Mike Kelly filled by another one of my colleagues, Meryl Swanson. You know, I've watched Meryl do her work both as a member for Patterson and as a chair of our regional jobs task force. She's impressive. She does the hard yards and the policy work. She speaks from regional Australia in an authentic voice. And I'd like to see Meryl get an opportunity to step forward so that we have within our grouping a good pipeline of women coming through who are ready to step up and take future front bench positions in a future Albanese government.
Well, Meryl Swanson, there you go. There's the boost. We'll see. It's probably lucky it's coming from you and not PVO. It would be the kiss of death otherwise, I'm sure. I wanted to ask you about...
Yeah, his predictions haven't gone so well, have they?
No, but he's honest about that. I wanted to ask you about the New South Wales Premier. She's set to keep the economy open as a priority, not no matter what, but over preemptive lockdowns. Is that the right call?
Well, Tom, Labor has supported the actions of our premiers, including Dan Andrews and Gladys Berejiklian, as they have guided their states through this crisis, both the health and the economic crisis. And I would expect that Premier Berejiklian is taking advice from medical experts, from her chief medical officer and others. Can I say, first of all, a real acknowledgement to the people of Western Sydney who are, responding to the government's call to come forward for testing, who are lining up to get that testing done, who are voluntarily self-isolating. They understand, as we all do, that we are all in this together and that we will at times have to change the way we live and work. And that's why it's important that nobody in New South Wales is complacent when it comes to social distancing, hygiene, hand washing and the like. So when it comes to the economy, Gladys Berejiklian is taking the cautious approach. She is looking at further restrictions, and I think that is sensible. We're all mindful of what's happening in Victoria right now. We are all thinking of the people of Victoria, and if we can avoid that type of lockdown in New South Wales, it would be good.
Just on that, you mentioned your support for Daniel Andrews. We've just learned that a senior bureaucrat in the Department of Jobs, on day one of the hotel quarantine program, emailed the Department of Health saying they needed 24/7 police supervision, and it didn't happen. This feels like a bad failure by the government, doesn't it?
Well, Dan Andrews is right to point to the fact that there is both a state and a national inquiries underway into what has occurred with the hotel quarantine in Victoria, and I think that is appropriate. Just as we're having inquiries into the Ruby Princess, we need to know where things went wrong and ensure that they don't go wrong in future. So in the sense that there is an inquiry underway, I think it's best that we let that play itself out. I can reflect that here in New South Wales, of course, my home state, we did have police involved directly with hotel quarantine. So far, that has proven to have worked well. And in fact, Tom, I think some people might know my own son is a police officer and involved in that type of work. And I think it is important that we do what we can to safeguard those people coming back to New South Wales who do present a significant risk of spreading coronavirus.
Of course, yeah, but we're nearly out of time, but you said before, we've got an inquiry. You said before the Ruby Princess inquiry, you were blaming Peter Dutton and the Morrison government. Why is there commentary on that situation and not on Victoria?
Because the Prime Minister, Tom, said directly that Australian Border Force would be in direct command of arriving cruise ships. Under the law, the people responsible for our borders, even the border security, biosecurity measures and tasks that are undertaken by state governments are undertaken under federal law, under delegated authority,
but a lot of the
under federal government.
The inquiry spoke about New South Wales Health making the decisions. In fact, they admitted they deemed a ship low risk, which was a mistake. Again, yet you were criticising the federal government. Again, it just draws into question why we wouldn't have direct comments on what's happening in Victoria, even though there's an inquiry with what looks like a real letdown of voters from that story I detailed earlier.
Tom, there's no doubt that the current situation is very frustrating for the people of Victoria, and there should be inquiries, both state and federal, and I support that. As I do support the inquiry that is underway in New South Wales, and hats off to Gladys Berejiklian for showing some leadership and instituting that inquiry. But, Tom, 4 days before the Ruby Princess arrived, the Prime Minister stood in front of the nation and announced at a media conference that arriving cruise ships would be under bespoke arrangements under the direct command of the Australian Border Force. Now, I don't think that was a marketing line from the Prime Minister. I think he meant it. We take him at his word.
That's the difference there. They still need health advice.
The Australian Border Force, in fact, do have their own health officials, Tom, and every action that's undertaken by a state health bureaucrat in relation to our borders is done under federal law and under the responsibility of both the federal Departments of Agriculture and the federal Border Force. But, Tom, I come back to the point that in these unique situations...
We're nearly out of time, but do you think what we've heard so far of the Ruby Princess inquiry does point blame at the Morrison government or at the New South Wales Health Department?
Tom, what I'm seeing coming out of this is an absolute mishmash at our borders. The Australian Border Force, having been put in direct command by the Prime Minister, did, it appears, nothing different in relation to the arrival of the Ruby Princess. I think it's important we let this inquiry conclude and make its findings, but what is undeniable is we have a spaghetti bowl of arrangements at the borders, and the one boat that mattered was let through by the Morrison government.
Okay, well, we're out of time. We'll have to pick up perhaps when the inquiry has its interim findings. Kristina, Keneally, thanks for your time.
Thank you.